came. And the very first time he came into the healing room at home, I'll never forget it as long as I live. The energy was in the room before we even started, and healers listening will know what I mean by that. And then as soon as I got anywhere near him and he was ready to begin the session, he went up. His whole body came up off that couch. It was hovering above the couch by about 18 inches. So being a very practical person, I thought to myself, oh God, I hope I'm insured for this. and after a while, he came floating back to the couch, and then we had a debrief afterwards, and he said, did you see what happened? So.
Hi guys, Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have another interview from our Real Life Stories series, where we are focusing on extraordinary lives of remarkable individuals making a difference in the world. Today we're honoured to have Angie Buxton-King, a respected healer, author and pioneer in holistic healthcare. With a career spanning decades, Angie has transformed lives through her work in energy healing. Her groundbreaking initiatives in integrative medicine within the NHS and her heartfelt advocacy for wellness and spiritual growth. Get ready to be inspired as we delve into her incredible journey and the wisdom she gained along the way. We're in for a treat, guys. Hi, Angie, and welcome to Spiritual Talk.
It's really nice to be here. What else would I be doing in this period we call Twixmas?
Yes, yeah, that space in between. But here we are, and I'm so excited for this because, as I said in the introduction, you have done so much work for so many people over the years. But can I go right back to the beginning of your story? Now, there's a lot of people out there. I always get asked, how would I know that I'm a healer? How did your journey begin, Angie?
Well, my journey began a very long time ago when I was just a twinkle in my own eye, really. So that was 1990. No, it wasn't. It was 1988 when my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And we were told by the medics that she would not do well with chemotherapy and that she would die very quickly. So I went on the search for other ways to deal with cancer. And that led me to the Bristol Cancer Centre. And we met some people there, and I, most importantly, met a healer there. And whilst my mum was receiving healing there, this was in 1988, I felt very warm, very emotional. Yeah, it was an emotional time, but it was different. It was like energy that I could feel around me. So I commented to the healer after the session had finished, and he said, oh, that's a sure sign that you could probably work with energy if you ever want to. And that was the last I thought of it for several years. And then that year that mum died, which was 1988, my youngest son, Sam, was born. And so I had two children then, two boys, 5 years between them, and Sam was my youngest child. And so I'd been alerted to the fact that energy was real. I'm a very skeptical person. I don't believe anything unless I've felt it or seen it myself. And so that was my basis. And that's always been my basis. But I did go looking for evidence of life after mum passed away, and went to a couple of mediums and sat in development circle, because it made me curious. And if I'm curious about something, I go searching for answers then. So I did sit in circle in St Albans, which is where I lived. And that was a very interesting experience. And I can't really say that healing was at the top of my list of things that I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a medium either. I was just curious.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did that for several years. And then I fell across the Healing Trust, which it was the National Federation of Spiritual Healers. And I did level 1 and 2 in their training just out of curiosity. And quite frankly, that training taught me everything that I didn't want to know rather than what I did want to know. So again, it went straight over my head, really. I'm a strong believer in, if it feels right to you, go with it. If it doesn't feel right for you, just let it go. It's for something else or somebody else. So 1995, which is 7 years after my mum died, my youngest son, Sam, was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. It's a very difficult disease to treat in a child because it's really more an adult leukemia. And even then it's difficult because it's very fast moving.
Yeah.
So Sam was diagnosed, and we were given the same sort of prognosis, that nothing really would help Sam, but we could try some initial chemotherapy. So we did. And of course, because I had already had that journey with Mum, I knew we were going to have to throw a lot more at it than conventional medicine if we were going to keep Sam with us. So again, I went looking for answers, but I looked within myself this time because I had done a lot of work. I'd done sitting in circle. I'd done initial training for healing. And I thought, well, I'm on the hospital ward at Great Ormond Street. What have I got to lose? But to, in their words, channel light through me into Sam and see if it was any benefit. So that's how I started. Did I know I could do it? Absolutely not. Is it worth trying even if you don't know if you can do it? Absolutely yes. But then it became very self-evident that actually what was happening was very real for Sam. We were on a children's ward and most of the children were going through the same sort of experience, and the other children were very, very sick indeed. And Sam did have, the usual side effects, lost his hair, etc., but he was very well compared to the other children, which began to make me think, oh, maybe there is something going on here. But a million things were going on at that time. And of course, he was having chemotherapy as well. I passionately believe, as we go further into our journey, in using both the best of conventional and the best of complementary, which is how I see healing or Reiki now.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know that I could do it, but I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. So I gave it a try.
And there's things on there that you talked about, your son being very ill, but what you've done to go on from there. But before we go on that journey, because there's a lot of people that are potentially missing out or not realizing. But here's a question straight off the cuff. Do you believe that everyone can bring healing to someone they love? Or not just someone they love, someone, friends, family?
I believe that as we're all vibrating energy, we can all, with our intention, bring energy through ourselves and into somebody who needs it more than we do. Very often these days, I'll just bring that energy in for myself, to help myself, to support myself. So I believe that any single person who wants to can do this. I think the key components are energy is very real and very much documented and seen with my own physical eyes. So I know that's an important part of the puzzle, but so is love. And you mentioned that a moment ago. And so is compassion and empathy. And those three things together are really very potent at the bedside, which is where I began to focus my energies after Sam died.
And we're sorry to hear that, but you went on then to create something very special, the Sam Buxton Sunflower Healing Trust. Can you tell us a little bit? Yeah,
that was some years later. So I initially, after Sam had passed away, which was 1998, I thought, well, everything I believe in is a load of rubbish. Nothing works. Sam's dead. Mum's dead. There's no point in any of this. And then I began to realize, because I'd seen a couple of articles in the press of very negative experiences of children going through cancer. Yeah. And I realized that actually we hadn't had that kind of journey. So I wanted to put, the lady in question was Nicola Hollick's, very well-known London businesswoman, and her daughter had had a dreadful time. Sam had died, but he hadn't had a dreadful time. We had the most wonderful 3 years of extra life with him, where he had vitality, and because he had energy within him, he was able to eat. So therefore, he had a longer life than many children who weren't receiving healing. Yeah. So about a year after, so in that year after Sam died, I focused my energy on working with animals. Because I thought, okay, is it just something special? Is it just a special relationship between mother and son, or is there something real going on here? So animal healing showed me fully that there is something special going on here, because animals don't believe in what I'm talking to them about. They can't listen to my positive chat and respond to it. They can just receive energy and love. Yeah. So I did that for a year. And then I read this article by Nicola Hollick's, and I thought, okay, I've got to do something. So I wrote off to the Daily Mail, it was, or the Daily Fail, as some of us like to fondly call them. And they didn't want to write a return article, but the Daily Express did. Yeah. So the Daily Express wrote an article, and I had a lot of parents come on to me and say, well, if this is what can happen for our children, why aren't you in the hospitals working with our children? So I thought, good point. So fast forward a year, and I then approached University College London Hospital to volunteer for 1 day a week for a month to prove a need. And if I had proved a need, would they then consider taking me on in some form or another? And so that's exactly what I did. And I wrote about all of that in my first book, which was called The NHS Healer, that was published in 2004.
I've got a copy here, just to plug that, guys.
That's the second book. So
that's
the first
the second
book,
one. Okay,
yeah,
that's not the first one.
No, that's okay. The first one is out of print now. It was published in 2004 by Virgin Books, and that is all about Sam's journey and how then I took healing into the hospitals. So from 1999, when I started at UCLH, until 2003, I was just working as a lone healer on the wards. And it was a fabulous success. There's no better way to put it than that, because the patients are in such a hugely difficult position. So are the families, so are the staff all treating them. To put compassion, which is brought into the ward by nursing staff and medics as well, but with a different edge, with a laying on of a therapy, was a very, very powerful thing to have done, and more importantly, powerful for the patients. So I was taken on 1 day a week initially, after that month's trial in 1999, then 2 days a week, then 3 days a week. And so by the time 2003 came, the managers on the unit decided they needed a manager of the team, because there were complementary therapists there: reflexology, aromatherapy, me, the healer. I was known as the spiritual healer because that was my training, but then I went on to do Reiki, and there was a counsellor. And so they wanted a manager, and I then met my second husband, Graham, who was a well-known Reiki healer himself. And he encouraged me to do the manager job. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do what I felt I was good at, which was giving support at the bedside. Yeah. But he pointed out to me that I could spread the therapy of healing if I did just do this. So I did. And that was the most difficult thing that I think that I've done in the last 25 years, be a manager in the NHS, because that's a whole new level of responsibility and does take people away from the bedside. But he was absolutely right, because we were then able to spread it into all areas of cancer within UCH. And then in 2006, this is where it does get a bit new agey. Apologies for that. In about 2004, I had a dream, and the dream was, it's great what you're doing, but you need to spread it outside of London areas. And I knew clearly when I woke up that what I needed to do then was to create a charity. Yeah. So in 2004, we created the Sam Buxton Sunflower Healing Trust. And that's its aims and objectives are to fund healers within cancer centres within the UK. So that's when that charity happened. And with that charity, we then got donations in. Again, that's more of the kind of thing that's written about in the book you just showed, which is called Onwards and Upwards. Yes. And in that book, it's very much a handing over of knowledge, because no one goes on forever. We all know of very eminent healers in the past. I don't consider myself to be one of them. I've just been a very focused healer. I'm a driven person. And so when I decide I'm going to do something, I do it. And so my focus was to spread healing into hospitals and then to spread it outside of that. That's what we did with the vehicle of the charity. And then we met some very wonderful people who helped raise funds for us. And then we've been very, very successful and won awards for integrating healing into NHS hospitals since then.
Can I just interject there? Because I didn't want to stop your flow, but to bring healing to the NHS, you must have come across some, how can I say, people that were against the idea, people that were doctors that maybe, would have poo-pooed this idea. I mean, did you come across that kind of resistance in the early days?
Oh, there were plenty of examples once I was on the ward of, doctors who would tut-tut and walk off down the corridor. Did I give a toss? No, not at all, because I was there doing what I was doing. And the beauty of being integrated into the NHS system is that you are a member of the multidisciplinary team, which means you're not a cute volunteer that comes in and goes out. You are integrated into the team. So therefore, you attend the doctors' meetings, you attend the nurses' meetings, and you get cross-referenced. And they soon became aware that if there was a void that they weren't able to fill in some way, then this was a pretty useful thing that we could push into the void and see if it had any effect. And then we began to accumulate sort of evidence that it was self-evident that it was really helping people.
So,
and those skeptics, sorry, I just wanted to say this, those skeptics can only be won over, and they're never really won over. They're entitled to their view, and that's absolutely fine. But they can only ever really be brought to the patient's sort of bedside alongside the healer by the fact that we're all doing something useful there. They're using their science, I'm using a different tool. But then we began to work alongside each other pretty comfortably. And for those that never believed in what I was doing, I didn't need them to believe in it. Yeah. I just needed the patients to feel better.
But that's pretty groundbreaking stuff to do and have that faith and belief in what you was doing and to push that through into NHS. Well, power to you. That's an amazing thing. But one question I would like to ask, you said fundamentally your training was in spiritual healing, but then you started to embrace Reiki. Two things. Why Reiki? And what is the difference is there a difference between spiritual healing and Reiki?
Okay. So I'm probably pretty well placed to answer that question because I trained as a spiritual healer. I did my part 1 and 2 in 95. In 2000, I did parts 3 and 4. Spiritual healing training is very useful. It's very esoteric, though, in nature. Whereas Reiki training, when I then came to it, and I'll come back to how I came to it, is more teaching people to be a technician of energy and teaching people how to be a practitioner. Whereas the spiritual healing is more of a holistic approach that teaches people about themselves and the esoteric world around them, and it's a broader stroke. However, I trained as a tutor for the National Fed of Spiritual Healers and delivered their training, so I know exactly what's in their training. And I obviously, well, you don't know this, but I met Graham, my second husband, in the year 2000. So after Sam died in 98, I was divorced from my first husband in 99, and I met Graham in 2000. When I met Graham, he rang me up because he was interested in the healing in hospitals, and he said he was Reiki, and I thought, oh no, not another
not one of those.
not one of those, not one of those people who is doing what we're doing but calling it something different. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So he came along to chat to me, and we had a good talk about it, and I didn't change my view. That was my view. But then I did the training because I thought, okay, a very good friend of mine who was a GP stroke healer in St Albans, Dr. Jean Galbraith, she said to me, Angie, I think that Reiki has been brought into the consciousness for us to make a bridge into the hospitals in a way that spiritual healing never will.
Yeah.
So I considered that, and I know that so many people in the spiritual world and in the medical world have dogma about the use of words. And if you've got their dogma in front of you, then use another word that takes you around the dogma to get you to the bedside. So I quickly realized that Reiki hat on as well, I could then approach a patient in a bed and say, would you like some spiritual healing? Perhaps they would say, as an example, no, thank you, I don't want any of that stuff. And I'd say, well, have you heard of Reiki? And I said, it's very similar. Would you like me to describe that? Oh, yeah, I've heard of Reiki. Let's have some of that. So in other words, my goal is, again, quite driven, not to lie to them, but just to have an understanding within my own self, which is my understanding. There is no difference. It is energy, love, and compassion, and there's a different technique. But in that technique, whether you're spiritual healers or Reiki healers, none of those techniques are used in a hospital, which is why we train healers to work in hospitals, because you cannot do a normal Reiki treatment or a normal spiritual healing treatment at the bedside. And that's all spoken about within that second book, Onwards and Upwards. So you cannot use the same technique. You have 30 minutes, 5 minutes to introduce yourself to the patient, 20 minutes to deliver energy, 5 minutes to get out. And that's all built into the protocols that support the therapy if we are working in a hospital. So is there a difference? I can honestly say that I don't believe there is, but maybe if you're a very wedded, dogmatic healer who thinks spiritual healing is better than Reiki, you might think there is. But does the patient think there is? I think you'll find they don't.
Yeah. And I think the overriding important thing, or the most important thing to remember, is the outcome, isn't it? Doesn't matter how we get,
Absolutely.
and that's the most important thing. And I trained as a spiritual healer, and I've touched on Reiki. I did a level 1 just to try to compare the difference. And personally, and guys will have a different opinion. Please let us know in the comments below what you feel between the difference between spiritual healing and Reiki. But for me, I didn't personally feel there was much difference.
That's been my experience in practice. And, I've been very privileged to work within the NHS personally for 12 years and then via my projects for the last 25 years now. And I've personally delivered thousands and thousands and thousands of sessions. Do I stand there and think, oh, I'll give spiritual healing here? Or do I stand here and think, I'll give Reiki? Absolutely not. I just open myself up, let the energy flow through me and deliver energy, love and compassion. That's it.
Now, Angie, there'll be some people that won't have experienced healing. Now, is there any negative effects? And I want to put the fear out or take it out of this, but does anybody have any negative effects initially when they receive the healing?
Okay, that's a really interesting question, and thank you for it. And that's because when we first started spreading the therapy outside of UCH, we went to Adam Brooks, and we had the first male healer who went in there, and because he was male, it's a very patriarchal system of medicine. Changing all the time, but it is very patriarchal. Because he was male, he was invited into doctors' meetings a bit more than maybe I would have been invited in. And they had an open forum, and they asked him, yes, but what happens, his name was Stuart, what happens, Stuart, when you start having negative effects on people? Because that surely must happen. Because in science, if there's a positive, there must be a possible negative. That's the way they think. And so he very wisely said the following, which is that energy goes in and helps the person where they're at. That might be observed as a negative reaction if the patient starts to release and cry, or it may be seen as some movement under the skin as the energy moves away. But this is a releasing process. And if that person who is upset because they've released their emotions, in my world as a healer, that means that they're now more in balance. And after a good cry, they may well feel more relaxed and so on. But if they are not, then I would refer to a counsellor who is on the team. So you never think that you've got all the answers as a healer, but you're prepared to work as part of the team. And actually, that's something that is worrying me, which we'll end the session with later on, about how healers have changed since I went in 25 years ago. So in other words, yes, you can look at a patient and think, well, they're crying now. They weren't crying before. That is what we call an ab reaction in medicine. But that just means that from the healer's perspective, and hopefully from the patients afterwards, and you wouldn't just abandon them, you'd support them through that, there would be a relaxation and a relief once it had been explained to them what had happened. So on the Healing in Hospital training, we teach them about ab reactions, and we teach them in Reiki. There's a lot of Reiki myths. There might well be a lot of spiritual healing myths these days, and in fact every day since I started working as a healer. I've never joined a club. I don't belong to any club. And by that I mean an organization, because the clubs hold you back with their dogma. So if you've got something to do, you're better off just getting on and doing it, has been my experience. I have tried to belong to organizations. I was a member of the Healing Trust. I was a member of the Reiki Federation. But everybody wants their name on the tin. And if their name isn't on the tin, they don't want to support you, basically. And of course, we had our own tin, the Sam Buxton Sunflower Healing Trust. So it was far better for me to be able to just go on with Graham. I had my wonderful husband, Graham, to support me in our work. Better for us to just get on and do the work rather than be slowed down by the dogma that organizations very often bring you. However, having said that, obviously anybody listening to me now will know that I'm quite a, what's the best way of putting it? Assertive person. And so, I think that it's the organizations are very good if you're not quite so sure about what you're doing. They can support you. They can give you codes of conduct and make sure that you're keeping within your boundaries. But for me, I always was a very authentic person. I still am. And we have our own guidelines and protocols that we operate within the hospital. So everything's good. But there is a place for organizations, but they were not for me. And interestingly, a medium said to me many, many, many moons ago, just after Sam died, actually, before I started this work, he said, Angie, it's as if you're invisible to your peers. And that's exactly how it's been, so that we've been able to get on and do our work, and the organizations and the dogma that's all around within them, they haven't seen us. We've just got on and doing our work. For instance, I bet you didn't know anything about our work before we met at the church.
No. And I was blown away by what you've done. And healing is a bit of a funny subject. People, and I want to come on to this in a second about how your role changes when you start to work in a hospice. Because when you're working in a hospital, it's a very different thing, isn't it? In terms of you're giving people hope and belief and that prospect of healing oneself. When you go into a hospice, you've got that mindset. People are going in to die. I mean, how do you then adapt your work to work around the sick and the dying?
Okay, so my view is a very different one to the one you've expressed. And the view that we have and the experience that we have tells us, and this is all about the integrated model, which we're super proud of course, because the patients in the bed do not see us as that person who's bringing hope. Do not see us as somebody who'll give them a cure. They're in hospital for the drugs. That's why they're there. Yeah. And hey ho, this nice lady has come into the room and offered me something to support me while I go through this crap experience. Yeah. And so we are not seen as cure people. And that relates to the subject I wanted to end with later, about how people, if you go down that road, the healing in hospital work is not for you. You're not there to cure them. You're there to support them in their hour of need. Magical, wonderful things will happen, but you will no more cure them than you will the chemotherapy. It'll just be a combination of both that will support them to get to wherever they're going. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the hospice work, for many, many years, the healing wasn't allowed in hospices. Spiritual healing is still not, or not that I'm aware of, but Reiki was taken on board in the hospices because of the word. Yeah. So Reiki wasn't spiritual healing, it was Reiki. And I think that changed around 2008 because there's been such a lot of, so let's concentrate on the focus for the moment. So the patient, when the healer walks into the hospice ward, doesn't think that healer is going to cure them. They think they're going to support them in this last part of their life, just like the hospice team are. That's the beauty of being in integrated projects, is though you're part of a team. Yeah. Now, some journalists over the years have said to me, isn't that frustrating for you? Because you could probably cure them. And I said, well, I don't know I can cure them. All I know is that I can help them. And when you have a healer that says they can cure, be very, very careful. Yes. What has cured them? Has it been the chemotherapy? Has it been some unique switch that the healing has helped to bring about? But you'll never know. And if it matters to you that you'll never know, then don't go in and work in this setting, because you'll never know.
So can I ask a bit of a controversial question here? Now, I'll add this in. I can always edit this out if you don't want to answer this, but do you get messages from spirit about someone's life and the way they're living it? So I know a lot of people that heal have received messages about, somebody that could be experiencing trauma, what happened to them in childhood, and this is why they have this condition. Do you find that your students or yourself have that?
Love your questions. Well, this is where boundaries come in. And this is why we've been so hugely successful in the hospitals, is because we have very clear boundaries. What we are doing is channeling energy, and we're supporting people. We are not giving them messages. Our code of conduct, if we were a spiritual healing, would preclude us giving messages anyway. So
Yeah.
would any authentic Reiki training. Now, there's lots of spiritual healing training and lots of Reiki training out there that will fudge those boundaries, but we will not be fudging those boundaries within the healing in hospitals. And that's why a lot of people have come on our training and have not gone into the hospitals, because they cannot, in their conscience, that's up to them, not give the messages and imprints that they receive. That's not what we do in the hospitals. That's why we've been able to do it so successfully.
Yeah.
Do I personally get messages about people? No, I don't. Does the patient sometimes have experiences? Yes, of course they do. But it's not about their own health. It's about, have they seen their dead mother standing next to them? Have they felt 10 pairs of hands on their body? Have they seen colours? Absolutely, yes. And they will bring it back to us. But this is where we teach people how to manage that. We don't follow them down that road and make an esoteric conversation that would be completely inappropriate for the hospital setting. So we don't negate their experience, but we always say, that's an amazing experience. How does it feel for you? So we don't rob them of that experience, but we don't join them in that experience. That's called boundaries.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
For many healers these days, they don't understand boundaries, and they are not going to be the healers that will want to work in a hospital. So that's self-selecting, really.
The problem is, I mean, I guess, you know, the NHS, the population, the masses understand the process of going through the health service. You know, there is a process, but to have the opportunity for healers to go in, to share and be a part of that process, you know, you would have never heard of this 50 years ago. So
No, you definitely would not.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the great late Harry Edwards wanted this to happen, and it never did, because I'm not surprised, actually. And I'll tell you why I'm not surprised, because I've just finished rereading Harry's book. He's written lots of books, but the one I picked up was The Science of Healing. And he talks in there a little bit like your question was aimed at, the psychosomatic part of illnesses.
Yeah.
Well, show me the research that says that is so. When you're going, and for instance, okay, let's make it personal for me. Does Sam, my 7-year-old boy, have a psychomatic situation arising within his life that would give him acute myeloid leukemia at 7? Did my mother? Probably yes, because she was an adult and she had a lot of historical grief and pain in her life that would have blocked her energy field. Is that something to do with some emotions and wounds she had? These are all subjective things, and these are all the things that we weed out in our healing in hospitals. Can you actually prove that on a scientific paper, randomized control? If you can't, don't say it. Yeah. That's how you succeed in the NHS. Are you in such a tight box in the NHS that you can't do your work properly? Absolutely not. If we look back in history, some of the best, simplest healing was done in very unorthodox ways, just by the laying on of hands, with no chat and no attempt to understand the process, just letting it flow. So I don't think any of the psychobabble is necessary. Interesting though it is.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in some aspects of it.
Absolutely. And again, you could argue there is a process of that on its own, the placebo effect as well, that helps in the process.
Exactly. And some of the films, we have 3 films on our website, and the first one was made 2006, second 2008 was a BBC One program featuring Graham's Reiki work, and then a couple of later ones, the most recent being 2018. And the very eminent cancer nurse, Stephen Rowley, says in there, even if it's the placebo effect, we don't care, because our patients clearly benefit. And that's the answer, really. But I can tell you, it's so much more than the placebo. The most amazing stuff happens.
So to be a part of that process is enough in itself, and having the opportunity, you don't mind going through that process. So what I want to say is put your ego to one side and allow that magic. But and there is I don't like to use that word because it makes it sound like Paul Daniels' magic tricks, but there is an element of magic to healing, isn't there? There's that bringing of energy, that possibility as well of the healing process. The other thing, though, I wanted to move on from this because, Angie, you've done so much as well, and you've been an inspiration. Now, can we just touch a bit about Graham and what happened to Graham, and you've gone on to write another book about Graham. Can you tell us what happened to Graham and his journey?
Absolutely. So I met Graham in 2000, as I said, and it was a mixture of, we were obviously meant to be together. In fact, in this first book I wrote at the end of it, I've met this wonderful man called Graham, and I know without any doubt that we will do more together than we ever could have done separately. And that was absolutely true. So Graham and I were together from 2000, and he passed away sadly in 2022. Graham became a very eminent healer within the NHS with children. He was very well known for his work with children. He was a great, big, strong ex-footballer man, but he had a beautiful, placid energy about him. I used to call him verbal Prozac. So he was he was perfect for children because he had so much patience.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm less patient. So he made his mark, and the film on the website shows clearly how well respected he was. But sadly, in 2012, well, we came up to live in Suffolk in 2009. In 2012, Graham was showing the first signs of cognitive impairment. And then I wrote to my book in this last year that follows through from that journey, cognitive impairment, through to very challenging times, very difficult times, very beautiful times, and useful times to share with others so that they don't have to go through quite what we went through. That's what all of my books have been about, actually. They've been about, they're not difficult to write because it's my life and I'm very authentic and real in them. And so if it was a difficult time, I'll say it was a difficult time.
Yeah.
And if it was a joyful time, I'll say it was. But that journey with Graham changed me in a way that I could only have guessed at. I'm a great one for believing in love, and I don't mean just the physical kind between people who love each other. I mean love as a tool. Very wonderful people have said that love is invisible, but everyone can feel it. That's true. So there's a bit of magic about that too, isn't there?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, my journey with Graham took me on a journey of something quite different that I'd never experienced, but hoped I was practicing, but soon found out I wasn't, which is unconditional love.
Yeah.
When you are practicing unconditional love, that I only really managed to achieve in the last year of Graham's life, you're not seeing that person as the person that you want them to be. You're being in the presence of that person's soul, so that everything you feel for them is completely unconditional. And you can and will do anything for that person because they're not their condition. They are the soul standing in front of you.
Yeah.
And so that has opened up a whole new world for me. So I wrote Graham's book simply to offer people some tips on how to survive it. It's like this is how you get through dementia book as the carer. And not really so much about Graham, but as the carer, which is what I was. Graham passed away at home, and that was a beautiful thing as well. We had very little support from outside authorities. There is hardly anything to support you with dementia. Cancer is bad. Dementia is, I now know, having been through both as the person who walks alongside, worse, because there's no support. And right at the end, when we should have been getting hospice support, there was still no support. And, Graham and I were together at home when he died, and the hospice nurse turned up 30 minutes later because that was when she could get to us, and it was too late. But wow. Anyway, that's all by the by. What then happened for me was an opening up. So I know that some religious people, and I'm not religious at all, believe that the way to God, for want of a better word, is through suffering. I don't believe that, actually. But I do believe that you get broken, and then out of that, you find a way to a higher consciousness. And so for me, after Graham died, he very quickly, a lot of people listening to me at that time would have thought that I'd lost it, that I was in some kind of grief process, but I was definitely not losing it, and I was experiencing the most amazing phenomena. So about 2 days after Graham died, I got this amazing calling card from him. I live in a very old cottage, and there was this huge collision on the outside of the wall, and I thought, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, And I know that some people will resonate when I say to them that when you know it's a spiritual message, you're not bothered by it. So I hardly woke up, really. I just said in my mind, hello, Gracie, thanks for letting me know you're okay. But following on from that became the most huge expansion of an understanding of a frequency that made me realize that there is no death, which is a hugely big thing to say. I appreciate that. But for me, it's completely real now, because with my broken heart, that's been broken many times in my lifetime, has come further and further expansion and an opening up of my vibration so that I can see into different frequencies. And that's where I'm at now. And it's a jolly exciting place to be. So because of that, I'm very aware. I never see Graham. I never see Sam, my son, but I'm aware of their energy, because their energy can reach me, even though I don't have the ability to see them. And so I can honestly say that I don't believe in death. I believe in simply that we lose our physical body and we have a change of frequency. Yeah. And that's led me on a really beautiful journey to self-discovering myself and my own potential. And so my affirmation now every night before I go to bed is, make me reach my potential and beyond.
Wow, that's a good one. That is a really good one. Really good one. Can we talk a little bit about the healing process as well? So I just to let everyone know, I have met you before. I do know quite a bit about your background, and we've talked privately. I wanted to touch, and again, we can edit this out if it's too controversial, and I'm not talking about specific people. I don't want to mention names, but you've also experienced levitation in giving people healing. You say, oh, yes, but I don't know anybody else that's ever experienced that, Angie. So it's pretty amazing.
Well, do you know what? Because I've seen it with my own eyes, and because I have a film of it, as you know, I showed it at our thing that you supported in. It's just so normal to me now, and that's very naughty of me, because you're quite right, it isn't normal for most people, but it is normal for me. So that first started way before this latest expansion in my energy, really. It started in 2002 when I was working at the hospital, and I'll have to give you a copy of my old book so you can see what that was about. But essentially, a lovely young man, I was introduced to him because he was waiting to go off to the hospice. Lovely man. He was a fireman. And he was waiting to go to the hospice, and I was asked to go in and see him and see if he'd receive a treatment. So I walked in, and this rather lovely young man was lying in bed, and so I told him what I did, and he said, well, you can't help me, I'm dying. So I said, well, it's true that I can't stop you dying, and that's not something that I would ever say to you anyway. But I do know that there's a lot more to life. When somebody says to you, that's the last thing we can do for you, there might still be quite a lot of life left to be lived. And maybe I can support your energy to be able to live however you want to live these last few months of your life, because I know the doctor has told you that. And he said, oh, right, okay, well, you're not going to cure me then? So I said, no, I'm absolutely not going to cure you, but I can give you a session and you can see if you like it. And if you do like it, maybe you'd like to use it to support you as you go through your next part of your journey. Okay, he says. So he's lying on the bed, and I always do the same thing. It's a gentle laying on of hands from the top of the head to the feet, and then I work above in the energy field above the body as well. And during the session, I completely knew that there was something very different happening, because his face started to rock from side to side and his features started to change a little bit. I thought, oh, this is all a bit different, but I'm so used to seeing different things now. It's my new normal. And so I didn't say anything to him, because we've talked about boundaries already. When I roused him and said, any questions? He said, well, of course I've got questions. He said, why was my head rocking like that? And did you look at my face? Wasn't that a bit weird? So I said, well, how did you see your face? And he said, well, I was up on the ceiling looking down at my face. I said,
wow.
Were you? And he said, I said, all right, have you done that before? And he said, oh, yes, I nearly died. And I came out of my body before. So that was perfectly normal to me. And he said, that was not normal what you just did to me, though. He said, because I could feel that. I could feel energy in my feet and every part of my body. He said, I don't understand that. And I said, well, if you felt the energy, that's a very positive thing. If you'd like some more when you're next in for blood products, then please do let me know, which he did, of course. So he came back. And then the second time he was receiving healing on the ward, I could hear the doctors coming down doing their ward round outside the room, just as this young man's feet were starting to elevate off the bed, which was now my new normal because I was witnessing it. And I thought, oh God, I hope they don't knock on the door and come in. So I sort of sent a mental thought out and said, just go on by. And for whatever reason, probably they saw my sign. They did. They walked on by. So I quickly roused him and said, any questions? And he said, yeah, well, my feet came up, didn't they? So I said, oh, did they? Same question. He was watching from up there. So he said, can I come to you at home? I lived in Hertfordshire then in St Albans, because he lived in Hertford. I said, yeah, of course you can. We don't charge for people who come from the hospital route. So he came. And the very first time he came into the healing room at home, I'll never forget it as long as I live. The energy was in the room before we even started, and healers listening will know what I mean by that. And then as soon as I got anywhere near him and he was ready to begin the session, he went up. His whole body came up off that couch. It was hovering above the couch by about 18 inches. So being a very practical person, I thought to myself, oh God, I hope I'm insured for this. and after a while, he came floating back to the couch, and then we had a debrief afterwards, and he said, did you see what happened? So I said, well, why don't you tell me what happened? And he said, well, I was just off the couch and there were all these people looking down at me through this yellow circle, and I was holding up my arms to them because I wanted to go to them. And I said, well, how does that make you feel, Matt? Because this isn't about a freak show. This is about how do you feel?
Yeah.
And he said, I feel fantastic. When can I come again? And so that was my adventure with Matt. But that started in 2002. Yes. So how do we get a bit of film of that? Well, Matt was a fireman. And he had his colleagues, and he said, I want to take a film of this down the fire station, because we watched a lot of films at the fire station, and this will be something they haven't seen before. So I said, yeah, all right then. I said, we'll try and capture it. And he said, well, I want you to hide the camera behind a book so that I don't see and I'm not affected by when you're going to do it, and you can choose whenever you want to do it in one session that I come for. That's what we did. So we had a couple of hours worth of this levitation going on. He wasn't levitating for a couple of hours, but we cut out a little clip of it, of him, and he didn't levitate his whole body. It was from his hips down, but you can quite clearly see that he's weightless. So when I see something that I'm really not sure about, I used to go to a very wonderful friend of mine called Ron Moulding, who was an excellent medium. He was like my spiritual mentor if I got stuck in that avenue. And I said, I really don't understand what's happening, Ron, because he's clearly dying and he's having this most amazing experience with the healing. So why is that happening? Why is this happening? Yeah. And he said, well, the Americans know all about this kind of thing, girl, he said, and it's called zero gravity. And he said, if you're channeling energy and it's fast enough to be able to change the molecular structure in his cells, it'll become zero gravity and he will go up. And this is all part of his ascension process. And if he's feeling the benefit of it, then I suggest you just carry on doing what you're doing. So we did. So before Matt passed away, he said, I'm going to send my wife to you for a session. I'm going to give her a sign through the session that's going to show her that I'm all right, that even though I'm not in my physical body, I'm all right. So I said, okay. And he said, I'm not going to tell you. So I said, that's fine. Fast forward, he did come back. He did pass away sort of about 8 weeks later, but he was so well. A common factor with people is that their physical body is dying, as it was with my son Sam, but their eyes become alive in a way that is quite unique, and they become more energetic within themselves, and of course their physical body is failing. And so he passed away, and then his wife came for a treatment, and I was giving her a treatment. And I was thought, well, I don't know what the sign is, because, you know, I was just doing my thing. And then all of a sudden her feet started to go up. And she said, she opened one eye and she said, that's the sign. He told me he'd do that. And so if he's done that, then I know he's okay.
Oh,
so that was it. It was an amazing calling card. But before he went to spirit, in my terminology, Graham attuned him to Reiki because he wanted to do that. Matt wanted to do that. And he said he would come through and help me with the healing. I'm sure he has. Have I ever seen him? No. Do I know there's a colossal amount of energy around when I give healing? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Do I know where it comes from? No. Does it bother me? No. Why not? Because it benefits others.
Yeah.
I'm not a clever thinker. I'm just straightforward.
I love that. I love that. And such an inspirational story too. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to come back to a comment you made earlier about what's the future for healing. And I can tell you're passionate about this and you have some concerns. What's happening, Angie, that makes you concerned?
Right. What's happening that makes me concerned, very concerned, so much so that we are in the process of closing our charity work at the end of this financial year. And the reason we're doing that is twofold. The NHS is not the NHS that we all know and love. We all know that too from our own experience, but is also not. So the thing that's blocking me thinking this is something that we can carry on with now is the NHS has a system that we are involved in. It involves protocols, HR, job descriptions, and application forms. The NHS can't recruit nurses at the moment, and medical staff. So there is a bit of HR block on any post that is not deemed medical, which makes it very difficult for us as a charity to put a new post in. We always pay our healers. We donate the money to the NHS Trust and they then get a salary via that system. So we don't employ them ourselves, they're employed by the NHS. Because there's a block on non-medical posts, that means us and many, many other people like us. The other thing that's concerned me more is that the healers who are approaching me to come on the Healing in Hospital course, which is part of the clear pathway to a post in the NHS, are alternative healers. There's a very real difference between complementary and alternative medicine. Complementary is something that works alongside and with conventional medicine. Alternative is something else. Alternative is what you touched on earlier with can I give a message to this person that I'm giving healing to? No, you can't. Do I want to work in that setting if I have to have some injections to protect the patients from me and me from them? No, you have to have those injections. Do I want to do that? No, I don't. Do I want to work in the NHS, says the healer who's now talking to me. I'm not sure I do. And it ain't going to work. So between the alternative view that many healers are coming through their training with, goodness knows why, I think it's simply because they don't know that our work is out there and that pathway is open to them. Why? Probably we're at fault with that because we've never belonged to their clubs. So they don't talk about our work because we're not their club. But this route has always been available to them and we've always done very, very well on our own auspices. But between the kind of healers who now don't want to really be passionate and driven about the work and aren't really sure that they want to work there anyway, and the fact that there's a block on paid posts at the moment makes it hugely difficult. So being the authentic people that we are within the charity, we won't continue to raise funds if we can't place healers. End of. If that were to change and I suddenly got, perhaps as a result of this, people who really want to work in the NHS, because our posts are only 1 day a week or 2 days a week max. That's 15 hours a week, but it's a paid job. Therefore, it has responsibilities. You have a job description. You have protocols you work to. You can't just turn up when you like. That's not the kind of healer that I'm being approached by at the moment. And I'm sure that there's an awful lot of private and alternative healers doing marvelous work, but that's not the healing in hospital work. So that's where we're at.
Do you think then, to ask a controversial question yet again, and I'm pretty good at this, by the way, do you think social media has played a part in that, in terms of giving people a false sense of what healing is?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? I don't think it's that. You see, no patient in any hospital bed has ever said to me, "You're going to cure me." no patient has had a view on healing because mostly they've never heard of healing.
Yeah.
Or even Reiki. You know, we in our healing worlds and mediumship worlds, it's our world. It's not their world. You just end up on a cancer ward and then you're going through a journey and somebody rocks up who says they can offer you Reiki or spiritual healing. So it's not the patients. Is it the publicity attached to healing? I don't believe so, because we run a very clear view through the center of all that. And we've got so much evidence that we can knock the skeptics and the naysayers to one side. Like there was somebody shared something within a healing group today talking about, you don't see many faith healers in hospitals, do you? And you don't see many people winning the lottery either who are psychics. You know, this is rubbish stuff, but that's not our pathway anyway. Our pathway is straight through the middle of it, very clear pathway with boundaries that the NHS likes. So I don't think it's that either. Is it the healing organisation's fault? Well, that's an interesting one. Having just read Harry Edwards' book again, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Is it the Reiki people's fault? I think less so, because they do make technicians rather than sort of faith healers. Am I a faith healer? Of course I'm not. I'm a healer. I channel energy, love and compassion. That's not a faith healer. Does the patient have to believe at all to have a benefit? Absolutely not. So I've, had a lot of publicity in the past when I've published a book about healing in 2004, but nobody wants to hear about our model of healing now because it's so straightforward.
Yes.
And you can't make a sensational story out of it because, well, they just accept it. But I am very encouraged on a different level. So I'm very discouraged by what I've just spoken about, but I'm also very encouraged that I see seeds all the time, sunflower seeds that have started from our cancer projects and have filtered out into lung and respiratory, into renal units, into people actually providing a budget for a healer to work in renal, to support renal patients. This has happened in many of the projects where we've had our initial seed. So our projects are never funded ad infinitum. We fund them for 2 years and then they are seeded. And then if the hospital or wants to continue funding it, they won't do that from their budget. That would be too controversial. They do it from charitable funds within their hospital setting. That's how it was very useful. Graham was absolutely right. You need to know how the NHS works so that you can make the bridge into it.
Yeah.
So job done. Do I feel sad about closing Sam's charity? No. I feel that a lot of really great things have happened via a lot of different channels of energy over the years, and we've played our part in that.
Yeah.
Do I feel I need to flog a dead horse? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Do I feel there's something else coming down my path? Yes, I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've been an inspiration, the things you've done over the years. And I'm just looking on at my iPad here, the list of things that you've done and the inspiration that you've brought to people. But here's a question. If you was to leave something for humanity, if you had to go home now, what would it be? What was your proudest moment?
Oh, what a lovely question. My proudest moment has been, without a doubt, discovering the consciousness tool of unconditional love. That's my proudest moment.
Great answer. Thank you, Angie. Before we go though, is there, do you run training for healers, or how can they get involved, people that wanted to be involved in what you do?
We have our website, which is, I'm sure you're going to put that up there.
I am.
And I'm, just because I'm folding up the charity doesn't mean that the healing in hospital training will die. It'll be there as a CPD, continual professional development add-on to people's healing training. But a lot of people who approach me to come on the training, won't be accepted on the training, and they get a bit cross about this. But the pathway to a post is to have been trained in Reiki or spiritual healing to national occupational standards. Now, over the years, from 2000 to 2010, there was a huge amount of work by many, many people, including Graham and I, on getting national occupational standards in place so that there's a benchmark so that people who do want to integrate healing know that people have been trained to a particular standard.
Yeah.
And they have to have been trained to that standard to then come on our training. And so it is a self-filtration process. So when we won our award in 2018, we won it because any therapy in group 2, this is a different sort of subject, but that means reflexology, aromatherapy, healing, Reiki, massage, could be integrated in the way that we have done by following our model. So our model will always be there. For the moment, I'll be here as a font of wisdom for this particular focus of attention. But will we be funding posts for going forward? No, we won't, because we can't put them in. And if if that was to change, it was very interesting for me recently because we almost got a big legacy donation through, and I thought, there was this moment within myself, because it didn't happen. The gentleman instead was very fond of Graham, and he left it to Alzheimer's instead of us.
Yeah.
And in a way, I felt quite relieved about that, because even if someone was to give me $1 million now, I couldn't use it because of the way the NHS is at the moment. Now, the NHS will change again, and maybe it'll change in a bigger, better way so that third sector, which is what charity is, will be allowed in. It is allowed in now. It's just almost impossible to get in at this moment. But I couldn't have spent that money anyway. So it seems like the right time to say, okay, let's pause this. And the information is in that book, Onwards and Upwards, for anybody to pick up in the future. But do you need to be a particular kind of person to work in the NHS? Yes, you do. You need to be very grounded. You need to be very focused, very driven, and you need to be a very good channel of energy. You cannot be a person that's just come from your training and expect to do well in this setting. You need to build your experience portfolio up. That makes you unique. And if you're driven, then it makes you even more unique. And the nurses and the medical teams like you to be human. So you can't go waltzing in with alternative views. I've got a lot of interesting views, but I don't take them on the hospital ward with me. They're mine, and they make me what I am, but they're not on open display if I'm on a hospital ward.
Yeah. There's a level of professionalism about the whole scenario.
It is. Yeah, and healers have been their own worst enemies over the years since 2000, because they get very antsy when you say, oh, there are professional healers and there are healers. But actually, professional just means boundaried healers. It means people who stick to protocols, who know how to fit into a multidisciplinary team. It doesn't mean you're any better or any worse than the other healers, just that you're professional in your practice.
Yeah. It's been an absolute privilege to interview you today. Thank you for giving up your time to be here on the channel, Angie. We really appreciate it. But before we go, what's next? What's next for you?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for spending the time to chat. I really enjoy your company. Your mediumship is fantastic. When I saw you demonstrate in church, I was very impressed by you. With your own background and own journey, I think you bring something very unique and special to the table. And you're very, very useful.
Oh, checks in the post. Thank you for that.
So what's different for me? Well, you heard me talk about, because you came along to support our event that you were going to do a demonstration for.
Yeah.
You heard me talk about my new interest in different dimensions, and that I've seen things from different dimensions. And that has opened up a whole new understanding for me. But that understanding is less out there and more in here. So what do I really want to do with the rest of my life? Reach my potential and beyond, whatever that is. Do I have a clear idea of what that is? No, I don't.
Angie, that sounds like a whole nother podcast right there. It does.
Well, potential and beyond.
Yeah, we'd love to get you back on again, because isn't that what it's all about? Trying to live to our fullest potential.
Absolutely. And so, without meaning to freak out anybody who's listened to me so far, I have had a in-person experience with a being from a different dimension, and that's been enlightening. I've met a whole load of people that became very special to me that had different experiences along those levels. But all very interesting. So I've been information gathering, and I've seen the most amazing things here in my cottage garden from different frequencies, different dimensions. I have absolutely no doubt that is real, because I've seen it now.
Yeah.
What am I meant to do with that information? I don't know, other than I do believe that the key to everything is love.
Yeah.
and unconditional love even more so.
And maybe that's your level of the soul being evolved. That's the level of where you're at. Your vibration is able to feel those more finer energies, those more subtle forces around us that I believe coexist in and around us all the time. We're just not aware.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, because it's like people say things like, you can't speak butterfly to a caterpillar. Well, you can't see different dimensions if you're vibrating down here. How do you raise your vibration? My way has been through unconditional love, but it's also been with a lot of background meditation, a lot of personal work, a lot of letting go of my own personal shite, excuse my French, and just owning my own stuff and personal responsibility. And, that has changed how I view life. But now I know that different frequencies exist. I will never mourn the passing of a loved one in the way that I have done in the past, because they're not gone. They're just with us. And we can't always see them because our vibration isn't the same as them. But the more we work on ourselves, the more that becomes possible.
Angie Buxton-King, thank you so much. You are an inspiration. Your life's work is inspirational, and we can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Shucks, Paul, thanks.
Guys,
okay, well, you have a good evening, and thank you so much for the chat.
Absolute pleasure. And guys, we'll see you very soon for another great story. And hopefully we can get Angie back on again to talk about those new things that are happening in her life. But for now, everyone, take care, and we'll see you very soon.